Old National Bank presents Big Ten Today. Glad to have you with us. I'm Mike Hall. We got a fun hour coming your way. There's a whole bunch in the football world as Jake Butt will join us. Paul Caponigri joins us to talk hockey. And a big guest, of course, is the new head coach at Penn State, Mike Rhoades. We're going to talk about his coaching philosophy. We're also going to talk a lot about him as a player, including a story I promise you'll hear him tell and you'll go, that's pretty gross. But first things first, the FrozenFour is happening in just a handful of hours. It is our big story. And you look at the bracket, only 4 teams remain. Half of them are from the Big Ten. The top overall seed is Minnesota. They'll take on BU. That happens Thursday in the late afternoon. Following that, it is the 2 versus the 3 seed Quinnipiac taking on the Michigan Wolverines. Well, Paul Caponigri is on site in Tampa, and he's joining us now. The scene you're giving us is not the most gorgeous and scenic behind you. I'm sure it's a lovely hotel room curtain, though. Give me an idea what the vibe is like there in Tampa there, buddy.
Well, first, I didn't want to make everyone jealous. In Chicago, it's probably gray there. The sun is beaming behind me, but where we stay, everyone's chomping at the bit at this point. Everyone's in town now. The teams got in Tuesday night. They're doing all their media stuff now, right? The goofy stuff that they'll show on the Jumbotron, all that, all the stuff that the players probably are having a little fun with, but I can't wait to get to the game. But this building here, and this is the 3rd time the FrozenFour has been in Tampa in 11 years, and there's a reason for that. They do an excellent job here, and the teams are excited. The one big thing about what the advantage maybe for our teams from the Big Ten is both of these teams were here last year, so a lot of the players know what to expect now with things like today with the media, and then also for the games tomorrow.
So we got plenty of time in the next hour to break down both teams. We'll get to Michigan in a sec. I want to start with Minnesota. They are the regular season champs in the Big Ten. They're the #1 overall seed. Give me a reflection on what this season has been like for the Gophers.
It's been pretty good. I mean, throughout. They've been up top 2 or 3 the whole year. They had the hardest schedule, maybe second hardest schedule of anyone, because they always do a great job of their non-conference schedule, playing their in-state rivals when they left, the WCHA, the teams like North Dakota, St. Cloud State, Minnesota State was not in that conference, but those are tough teams, so they always play those teams. They like to keep those rivalries in their schedule. So early in the year, they have a very difficult time with these teams. A lot of splits. So as the season went on, their record was good, but it wasn't great because it's just hard to beat teams back-to-back nights. A lot of them were home and home. So you'd play a home game at Mariucci and a road game at St. Cloud State, and they fared well, but they didn't dominate and go 10-2. They were just a little over 500, but as the Big Ten season got underway and as it went on, they dominated more than anyone else, and it shows how special they are because the Big Ten was the toughest conference this year, but they won it going away by the biggest margin ever in points. They had some injuries late in the season, which really is the only thing I think that slows them down as we go forward. But right now, they're probably as healthy as they've been. They have the top line in college hockey with the Nice, Snuggerud, and Cooley line. Their defense is stacked with Lacombe, Faber, veteran guys. A lot of these day and age now, you don't get veteran juniors and seniors, but they have 3 guys that are juniors and seniors leading the way back there, and then a senior goaltender. So all the ingredients are there. And how they've gotten there, they got healthy at the right time at the end. So they've set themselves up to be in a really good position here coming into Tampa.
You brought up something that I think is one of the most interesting things with this Minnesota team is whether it is Faber or Close or whoever that does have veteran leadership skills. This is a young team. We came into the year knowing this was an impressive freshman class, and that's not to knock Matthew Nyes, who we talked a lot about last year. But let me focus on Snuggerud and Cooley and the rest of the freshmen on this roster. Give me some perspective on how impressive this group of rookies at Minnesota is.
I think the best way you can say how impressive they are is that you never looked at them as rookies. You're waiting for a ton of freshman mistakes, and you never really saw them. I mean, I think Logan Cooley maybe had some up and down games, but you saw the flair and the dynamic play from him throughout the season. And Jimmy Snuggerud, I think, was a little bit of a surprise how good he would be. I mean, he was first round draft pick, but late in the first round. I think everyone thought he would be good, but he stepped in right away and did not miss. And I've talked about it all year, how I'm just in awe of how these 18, 19-year-old kids come in, really in any sport, and they come in and look like they're proven veterans. And they've also gotten better during the year. They didn't start the year great and get worse. They've both gotten better, especially Logan Cooley, and then a few guys on defense. Ryan Chesley, Luke Middlestat have been really good players. So they're not getting the huge playing time because you have Faber, Lacombe, and Johnson, but they've come along and they've had to play key minutes. And it's just a well-rounded team when you think about the youth and then the veterans that you spoke of earlier.
Yeah, Snuggerud, the freshman, leads the team in goals. Cooley, the freshman, leads the team in assists. Impressive way for them. A lot of
leading going on there. Not just in the team, but the Big Ten.
Right, yeah. And they head into their first FrozenFour. But it's not their first NCAA tournament games. They got a couple of them under their belt. Paul, they've been dominant in their first two NCAA tournament games. Their scores were 9-2 and 4-1. What have they done so well specifically in their last two games?
You know, they just stuck to their game. And I think, you know, a lot of people kind of complained about them getting St. Cloud and Minnesota State in their bracket because all these Minnesota teams, and they weren't seeded properly. It's a whole thing that could go into. But they just took it. Every challenge that's put in front of them, they've just answered it. Specifically, I think I'll beat the Canisius team because that was a game they should have won as top seed against Canisius, who was a Cinderella, of which that they were like the 40th ranked team in the country. Played them well early, but Minnesota kind of took it away. But in the St. Cloud game, Logan Cooley said they played their best game. But to me, the guy that really stood out was Jackson Lacombe, the senior defenseman who, quite frankly, could be playing NHL all season in Anaheim, but he chose to come back this year. He was unbelievable, made a long stretch pass to Logan Cooley for the game go-ahead goal, which turned into the game winner. And then he scored the third goal from the point with a bomb shot. I mean, he was just a man against, I don't want to say children, but he was just a beast and a stud. I called him a stud on Twitter, and he just was an excellent player. And, you know, you can get that from 10 different guys in this team, and they just seem to take their turns and makes it so difficult.
Now, that being said, we've seen in tournament play in the basketball world that being the top seed overall does not necessarily mean you are going to make it all the way to the championship game. So if they are, however, going to make it all the way, they're going to have to take down BU. What do they have to do in this matchup?
You know, I'm thinking about it. We've talked a lot about them. Is they've got to wear down BU's defense. They're great, but they play four guys. Two of their guys don't really play back there. So you got to try to wear them down, which they can do, I think, physically as well as, you know, physically with body checking, but also with just their skating. But the other key is BU's special teams, power play and penalty kill, are not great. They're middle of the pack in the country. They're in the 30s. Minnesota's power play can be lethal at times. You know, they're both in the top 15 power play and penalty kill. So when you come down to these top teams playing each other, those little things could come into play. And I think special teams, where Minnesota's been better than BU throughout the season, could play a big part in this game tomorrow afternoon.
Before we go, this is a little tangential to the actual matchup of the FrozenFour, but still, the Hobie Baker finalists have been announced, the Heisman Trophy of college hockey. 3 men are in the finalists, as per usual, all 3 from the Big Ten, including 2 from Minnesota. How about that, Paul?
It's pretty good. I think I mentioned this yesterday on the show. It's the first time since 2009 that a conference in college hockey has had all 3 finalists. For Minnesota, it's you know, you got 2 line mates, so they're almost helping each other, and they do it in different ways. You know, Cooley's a little more flashy guy. His speed, his edge work, his passing is just magical. You get mesmerized by it. Where Matthew Nyes is more of a powerful player, does score a ton of goals, had the most game-winning goals in the country this year, but he's big and physical, works really hard, makes it really hard on a defense in a different way. And I think that what makes those 2 guys so great on a line is they make it difficult for their team in different ways. But, you know, I think it's anyone's game, quite frankly, on this, especially when you're talking about 3 guys from the same conference. So, you know, these other voters that are coming from the East, that, yeah, they've seen these guys, they don't know them that well. the votes might be spread out a little more and could make for an interesting a race on Friday when it's announced.
I was lucky enough like 16, 17 years ago to be a part of that Hobie Baker ceremony on ESPN giving it away. I forget if it was Matt Carl or Ryan Duncan, but it was a really cool event to be there.
Matt Carl sounds right.
Yeah, and it was pretty special cool stuff. Michigan and Quinnipiac will be the late game of the Frozen Four coming up Thursday around 7:30 Central Time. Michigan leads the country in goals scored. Quinnipiac very good at scoring goals themselves, but they're tops in the land in goals per game allowed, only 1.5 per contest. They did meet up last year in the NCAA tournament, and the Wolverines were victorious. Paul Kaepernick joins us once again to talk more about this squad. And I will say this, Paul, last year they played Denver in the Frozen Four and lost 3-2. If there's something about this Michigan team that makes you feel different about this year, that they have a better shot to advance to the title game, what would it be?
I guess experience. You know, yes, they have a ton of freshmen again this year, but over half of the team was here last year in the Frozen Four, and a lot of what I spoke about in the pageantry of coming in here on Tuesday and then today with the media and getting a ton of attention and the hype around it. Michigan has that experience. A lot of their players, Quinnipiac does not. I think that helps them. I think also the fact that they played them last year in the regional final, as it was noted there, and beat them 7-4, which was, you know, Quinnipiac same as last year. Their stats in terms of defense and everything. And last year, Michigan, you know, dismantled that by putting 7 goals on them. So I think that, like, maybe confidence, and then the freshmen that are here that you're talking about, Adam Fantilli, who's the, you know, the player of the year, possibly, you know, another Hobie Baker candidate, leading scorer in the country, and Gavin Brindley, Seamus Casey. These guys played in World Juniors. They're not going to be shy for the scene. So I like for their older guys to have the experience and these young freshmen that pretty carefree guys that'll jump right in there and be excited for it.
They were dominating their first game of the NCAA tournament, winning 2-1. Had to squeak by in the second one. In fact, needed an overtime victory. They scored less than a minute into the overtime, but still, I think one thing that's interesting about Michigan this year, Paul, is how many overtimes they've had. 12 different games this year. That's a program most for Michigan. What's that tell you?
That tells you they played a lot of tight games, which is good for, you know, you're playing the top teams here. These games should not be easy. So you're battle tested in close games. And just going specifically to that Penn State game in the regional final, I think, and we talked about this in the show before, like, it was a good hard test. Penn State played more of a Quinnipiac style game, which was not their norm. It was a tight, close checking game. It wasn't a barrage of shots and great scoring chances. And Michigan was losing late in that game, and they were able to tie it late and then win it in overtime. So I think that was a great – it showed that Michigan can play both ways now. They've matured to a point where they don't have to run and gun a team and beat them 7-5. They can win those 2-1 games, and I think that was really maybe a good growing moment for Michigan in that last one.
And let's talk about the wild 8 months it's been for their head coach. He used to play for them a decade and a half ago. He comes onto the staff. Mel Pearson gets fired in August of this year. He becomes the interim head coach. Now he officially, just a couple days ago, is the full-time head coach, and he's in the Frozen Four. What a journey he's been on.
Yeah, and I think that's partially why they went to him, is they felt they could handle it. I mean, if you look at, you know, Bill McCall has been there quite a while, and, you know, a lot of people maybe thought he would get that role, but he stayed in the same role he's in, and give him a lot of credit for, you know, being probably a really good guidance to Brandon Rhoades. But I think they saw something when they hired him to come in the year before. And, you know, people talk around the hockey world. He was coaching in the pros too at times, and kind of know when you have a guy that kind of has maybe an it factor a little bit, has really good with people. You know what I mean? Coaching is not all about, you know, the X's and O's and all that stuff. And I think Brandon Rhoades has that kind of way that he can be the tough guy, be the coach, but also be a player's coach. He's a young guy. He can relate to players. Like you said, you know, he was there 15 years ago, which isn't too long ago for us old guys, but yeah, he's found a way to do it, and you've seen it now that he's in the Frozen Four. I think he earned getting the interim taken off. And I mean, you're talking about they had illnesses on the team. They had suspensions. You know, there were a lot of different things going on at Michigan this year. And to have this team, and a lot of people at times were like, why is Michigan ranked so high? Well, the pairwise, their schedule was very difficult. But they got through all the weeds of that. And look where they are now. They're in the FrozenFour, and Brandon Rhoades has been leading the way unbelievably as a first-year coach.
Yeah, Narado, of course, had a chance to play in a FrozenFour when he was with Michigan back in the day as well. Now he'll be the head coach in one. And it'll be against a Quinnipiac team that, as I mentioned, gives up only 1.5 goals per game. So give me the key. How can they get on the scoreboard in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they change their game. I think they just play their fast, exciting brand of hockey. You know, don't get frustrated, I think, is a big thing. You know, last year when they played them, they got out to a big lead, and Quinnipiac had to kind of play they had to play catch up and not their style of kind of, you know, keeping the front of their net. They had to come and attack. So if Michigan can get off to a great start, obviously that's the way they want to go. But I mentioned it yesterday, using their defense with Luke Hughes, Seamus Casey, Edwards, bringing them into the rush. Just adding that extra layer of offense is a way to break through against Quinnipiac. And the one thing I'll say about Quinnipiac is they're a good defensive team. They're also in the top 5 in the country in scoring offense. So we have in this FrozenFour, all 4 of these teams are in the top 5 in offense as well. And the one thing about Quinnipiac is, and I'm not to knock their conference, it just wasn't as strong. So I think they garnered a lot of their offense maybe against some of those lesser teams in the bottom half of their conference, but they can still put the puck in the net. Colin Graff's a top 5-7 scorer in the country. So you got to be careful there. But I think the key is play their games and get the guys like Luke Hughes involved, which, I mean, they do anyway. Like, you'll watch them and you can't tell who's a forward and who's a defenseman, because Luke Hughes is down in the corner and you have maybe Adam Fantilli up on the blue line because they've switched spots for the moment, and it really can mess with a team, especially when those guys are so skilled and quick with the puck.
Well, let's talk about their netminder in this one. The junior had a 50-save game earlier this year, had a really impressive performance to get them into the FrozenFour. How much is on his shoulders?
You know, Eric Portillo it's been an up and down year for him. He got the net last year, had a really good year, was the second team All Big Ten, and this year preseason he was the picked to be the first, all league goalie. And, he just had a very roller coaster type of a year. He gave up those goals where you kind of shrug your shoulders, like, how did that one get in once in a while? Once in a while that would happen. And I think late in the year that kind of went away, which is, a lot of times that's just the one thing that needs to change. And it has for him. And he realized obviously realized playing his best at the end of the season in the important games he's able to do that, and I think you start forgetting about that other stuff, and his confidence has grown. So I'm expecting nothing different than what we saw against Penn State in the regional final, where he played great, let in only 1 goal, and was able to get them to this FrozenFour. I expect him to be back, plus another guy that's had the experience of being in a FrozenFour, just like Justin Close.
It would be journalistic malpractice to not have a chance to talk about Adam Fantilli with you more specifically because of the season he's had. He won Player of the Month nationally multiple times. He leads the country in scoring, and he's a freshman, and he's a Hobey Baker finalist. What do you expect from him on Thursday?
I expect him to be great. I mean, what else can you expect, right, Mike? But no, the one part of his game where I think he's matured late in the season is his discipline. And that's going to be important in this game, and in this, what they hope to be 2 games on the weekend is, earlier in the year he got some penalties, retaliation. He knew he's one of the top players, but he's 18 years old. Teams know this. And once you do it once or twice where teams can, give you a little stick or a little jab and you're going to retaliate, that's going to be on the scouting report. And so it started to build up a little. He even got in a fighting penalty major where he got suspended for a game. But in the last, I'd say, month, pretty much the month of March and into the playoffs, you've seen his temperament kind of settle in. You're seeing a maturation process right in front of your eyes in terms of not the hockey playing, but the discipline part of it. And you're seeing it with the rest of the team. It's kind of gone hand in hand. Their discipline has been great the last 4 games in the playoffs, and Adam Fantilli's been right there. So growing on and off the ice, I think has been big, and I expect him to be dynamic. He's a man child. He's 18 years old, and he's 6'2", 200+ pounds, and he can skate like the wind. Saw him blow right by a Colgate defender and then bury a goal, and that just demoralizes teams when one guy can do something like that. You're like, how do you stop that? We were planned to stop it. We got the coverage, but he just beats you. That just happens in sports sometimes, and Adam Fantilli is the one guy that can do that for Michigan than anybody better.
Paul Canapinigri in Tampa. We will talk with you Thursday evening after both FrozenFour games are done. Looking forward to it, man.
All right, Mike. Take it easy.
It's time now for our big stat brought to you by Old National Bank, and it looks at the career of Mike Rhoades as a head coach. He, of course, just took over the men's basketball job at Penn State. 27 wins this past year as the head coach at VCU. That's the most that great program has had in a decade. He made the NCAA tournament this year, 2 years ago, and 2 years before that as well. And we are lucky enough to have Mike Rhoades join us for today's big interview. Mike, congratulations on getting the gig, first off, and thank you for joining us. Let me start with this. We're going to talk a ton about you as a coach, but give me an idea of you as a player, right? You weren't a good player. You were named the USA Today National Player of the Year in 1995. What was the scouting report on Mike the player?
I was a scoring point guard for my team. I did a little bit of everything, and I was a competitive dude. Was probably my greatest asset as a player, and played really hard, competitive, super competitive. I think it's helped me in coaching, but I love to be in the gym. I was one of those guys that was always in the gym, always trying to find pickup games. But I could do a little bit of everything as a point guard, and I was around some really good players, so that helped for sure. But I think my competitiveness helped me the most.
How would Rhoades, the coach, treat Rhoades, the player?
Oh boy, we'd have some battles. We'd have some battles for sure. So, I was a hard-headed player for sure. But once the coach had my back, it was on. So I played for some very successful coaches from high school all the way through, and they had my back. It was go time. But I also know I probably wasn't always the easiest to coach for sure. And it's probably one reason why I don't mind some of those guys on my team too. That their will to win is something I want.
Do I have this right? In '94, you won a D3 national title in overtime?
Yes, we did. Both games in overtime. Beat Wittenberg in overtime. We were down 14, I think, with about 4 minutes left. Came back and won in overtime. And then we beat NYU in overtime as well. The best thing about NYU, they had 59,000 students, and we had 950 students in our college. So, but you can only play 5, and we had the right 5.
Give me your best game ever as a player.
Best game ever as a player, probably in high school. I played for my uncle Mickey Holland, who's a legendary high school coach in Pennsylvania. We beat Weatherly, one of our rivals, my senior year in the district playoffs. I had 43. I had 103 fever. Threw up in the garbage can throughout the game a couple times, but I had 43. And the guy that guarded me was Troy Gregory, who's one of my best friends. He was one of my teammates at Lebanon Valley College. We ended up playing together and winning a national championship together. That was one of them because of it was a double overtime game as well.
Listen, I'm happy you have that memory, but what kind of uncle is letting his nephew play with 103 fever?
He had no chance. I was playing. Times were a little different then. My father was an old high school football coach in Pennsylvania, so rub some dirt on it was pretty much his mentality. So that's just the way I was raised. So there's no way I never missed a game in high school or college. You just didn't. If the bone wasn't showing, you were good. So that's just how it went in my family.
How's the shooting form nowadays?
Pretty good. I can still shoot it. Now I'm not the best shooter on my staff. Joe Crispin is now. A legendary Penn State hooper. We're super happy to have him. But I've always said I've always been the best shooter on staff. But then I hired Joe, and that sort of ruined my mojo there. But we're glad to have him. But I still have 2 young sons that play that that love basketball, so I sweat with them a lot. The back hurts a lot, but nothing that some Advil and some ice can take care of.
Okay, so now you're the head coach at Penn State. When it became officially official, who was the first person you called?
My brother and my mom.
What'd they say?
My brother and my mom. Just elated. You got to realize we grew up 2 hours away. My brother and sister have degrees from Penn State. My father used to drive us to everything here on campus at Penn State, wrestling matches, football games. I remember being a little kid seeing games in the rec. I came to basketball camp here. I worked basketball camp here when I was in college, played pickup against a lot of the players all over the place in Philly and so forth. So just got to meet so many Penn State people. They're in my lives for a long time, and then never thought this would happen. I was super happy at VCU, loved my team there, but the pull from the president and the athletic director and their alignment and what they want to do with basketball, my wife and I looked at each other and was like, we got to do this. And when I do something, it's head first. I don't gingerly walk into something. I slide into it head first, and that's what we're doing. I'm super excited.
You said what they want to do with basketball was part of what drew you in. What is it they want to do with basketball at Penn State?
Well, when your president was at Kansas and Louisville and see what basketball can do on those campuses, I think they have a feeling, why not here? Let's get this thing going. There's so many sports here that are winning and winning big, and they asked me what my plan would be, and they understood. I always say there's people that say they want to win, and there's people that are committed to winning. And talking to our president and talking to Pat, our athletic director, it was very, very, I felt it. I could hear it, I could see it, I felt it, that they want to be committed to winning, and winning the right way, the way Penn State and all their athletics win, with great class and integrity and great character. And they want to do that with basketball, and they wanted my plan to do it, and we're all on the same page, and we're going to push forward. We're going to change a lot, but we're also going to make sure we have the tradition of Penn State athletics at the forefront.
Okay, so that's the big challenge you have here, Mike. I mean, yes. VCU has become a powerhouse in a way of that level of basketball, being nationally relevant year after year. Penn State doesn't have that history. They have had a handful of absolutely very good years, but they don't have the history that your new conference rivals like in Indiana, Michigan State, et cetera, have. So what is the key to getting there, to getting sustained success at this school?
Well, you just said understanding the history, right? Learning from the history. There's pockets of success there. We got to study that and understand that, and from the way they played and they went about it with that specific coach and those players. But also learn from the other part of the history of Penn State basketball, the things they might have done that didn't work. Don't repeat that. So that's the plan that we have as a coaching staff. Number one is you got to get good players. You got to recruit. You got to build a family to make it special. You got to get good players that are willing to work and play our style that we want to play. Look, we're going to be bold in that approach. We're going to go and try to beat out really good programs for good players. But we also, the players that we have and the players that we're going to get, it's all about development. And that being different in our approach with all that. And then being very aggressive. Every team that I've ever coached, we're going to be super aggressive on both ends of the court. We're going to play with great freedom. We're going to try to be an exciting team. But it starts with building it with great players that are committed to each other and committed to the staff. And everywhere I've been, I've put my spin on it. So we're going to do that here at Penn State. We're not going to look back. We're going to learn from the past, and we're going to use that to build this thing. But when you have a commitment from administration that wants you to change things the right way, it's go time. Let's do it.
You were at VCU for a little bit. Give me the biggest thing you learned from Shaka Smart.
Relationships with the players. That was one thing that was always very important to me. My wife and I became a head coach at 25 at Randolph-Macon. We made it a family from day one, and that was so important to us. When I went and worked for Coach Smart, his relationship, his communication with the players, I wanted to take what we built at Randolph-Macon with that family approach and the relationships with the players and add Shaka's spin on it. The communication with the players was paramount in building what we did at VCU, and I took that, stole that, whatever you want to call it, and added it to what we did. And it makes it a lot of fun when you have relationships with your players that go beyond basketball.
What kind of relationships do you have with current Big Ten head coaches?
Well, the biggest one I have is, of course, with Phil Martelli at Michigan, because I hired his son. So there better be a relationship there because I'm taking care of one of his kids. But Coach Martelli for a long time has become very close to me in our program because Jimmy's in it. So he's a guy that has already helped me figuring some things out and all that. Matt Painter, I would consider a buddy of mine who just, I've always asked him for advice and asked him how he did things and all that when I was at Rice as well as when I been at VCU. I just have great respect for him. And Coach McCaffrey, I've always run into him on the road, and just the way he plays and the way he looks at it. I followed his teams at Siena because the way he played, and really studied his program one summer when he was at Siena. So I'm looking forward to getting to meet everybody and getting to know everybody. Coach Peichel, I'm a big fan of as well, and somebody I will spend a lot of time with navigating this league for sure.
Let me ask you about a different kind of head coach. What was it like meeting James Franklin?
Awesome, awesome. I told him, and I met him at a leadership conference when I was at Rice down in Texas, and even sat with him and discussed a lot of things. But I grew up in Pennsylvania, so we cheered on Penn State football for a long time, and my wife, wherever we've been, if Penn State football was on TV wherever we were at, that was a Saturday afternoon. I love college football. I'm pretty much I have a linebacker's mentality to coach basketball, so I think the football coaches will enjoy watching our team play for sure.
How many Penn State football games have you seen in your life, you think, in person?
20, 30. A lot when I was a kid. Then, of course, in college, before your basketball season, everybody likes to take road trips, and I slept on a lot of couches in State College with my teammates, with all our different friends up here, and you found a way to get in the stadium. So as much fun as the tailgating was, going inside on a Saturday afternoon with 113,000 people, it's a fun college experience.
Before I let you go, Mike, you mentioned at the top that Joe Crispin is on your staff, and that means John Crispin, who used to work with us here at the network, is going to be around your program a lot. So listen, you're going to need someone to swat him away. I'm happy to do it. Just give me a call. I can give you some space from him.
I'm sure he'll give us his opinion and his approach. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Look, the one thing I told many of the alumni, like Joe and John, this is not my program. The press conference was my day to shine in the program. It's a players' program. We're going to stand on the shoulders of the players before us. There's nothing better than being in college and being on a team and building that brotherhood and that friendship you have with people for the rest of your life. I told John and Joe, they know it, and we're spreading the word to everybody that I want all these guys that put on that Penn State basketball uniform to come back and help us build this something special that they could be super proud of. So I know John will be out front helping us with all that. So he's welcome in our gym, in our offices any day of the week, man.
Yeah, the future is uncertain, but John telling you what he thinks, that is a guarantee. Mike, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
On the big. Thanks so much for joining us, too. Look forward to chatting with you throughout the coming years.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Saturday was the Michigan spring game. No Blake Corum, no Donovan Edwards, no Will Johnson on defense. Did have J.J. McCarthy. He stumbled a bit early, but recovered nicely. Wide receiver Peyton O'Leary, his name got called a lot. Technically, the defense won, but it's a spring game, so does anyone really win? Well, yes, Jake Butt wins, because not only was he on the broadcast and back in his old stomping grounds, but he was basically an analyst, play-by-play hybrid. Man, you're stealing people's jobs. You know, I got kids to feed, bud. Kugler has kids to feed.
Well, I gained a new appreciation for what you do, Mike, like we were talking off air, but wise statement you said there. Does anyone really win in a spring game? No, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and I'm excited to dive into it with you.
There's all this talk right now about, I think Auburn's head coach basically said, why don't we play UAB for our spring game? And like the social media response is like, no one is stopping you, except for the one big injury that might happen in that game, or if somehow a team like that were to upset someone. and then a coach gets fired, then that's a big problem.
That'd be interesting to see for sure.
What was your main takeaway from watching this Michigan team in what was a super early spring game? I mean, earliest it's ever been for Michigan.
So I don't want to say a takeaway, but there were some things I looked at going into the game, some areas I wanted to see. And the main one was the cornerback 2 slot, understanding it's looking like Ohio State, Michigan are on another crash course in the East. So who's going to guard Marvin Harrison Jr.? Who's going to guard Emeka Egbuka? Michigan loses DJ Turner and Jamon Green to the NFL. We know Will Johnson will be in that #1 spot. So all eyes for me were on that cornerback 2, and a name that had popped up a lot was Amarion Walker. 6'3", long arms, super athlete, and this was our first chance to get to see him in live action. Didn't have a great day by the stat. The numbers didn't say he had a great day. Peyton O'Leary, the receiver he was guarding, 100-plus yards, couple touchdowns. He looked great. But I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet because it's just like anything. This is his first live action playing corner at the college level, and he wasn't in bad position. He was actually in good position a majority of the game. He had a chance to have an interception, didn't come down with it. And to me, the game will slow down with more repetitions. He has another summer, all football camp, and then in season he'll be able to ease into it, similar to what we saw with Will Johnson last year. He was in good position. Now it's about getting the game to slow down and trusting that position so you can go execute what you need to do. Another thing that came up is you always want to see these new guys, the early enrollees. And you mentioned it, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards out. Both those guys were beat up last season. So who was that running back 3 that's going to spell them? Ben Hall, an early enrollee. Is that? That's right. It's your. You guys are both equally athletic and same build as well.
Very quick pickup there.
He looks great though, and he reminded me of a young Blake Corum, where as you press the hole in a running back, you see a gap on the film, and we're all saying, "Hey, hit the hole now, hit the hole now." The elite backs, they have patience to it. They set up their blocks. So what Ben Hall did, especially as the game, he kind of got into the flow of the game. Instead of just hitting the hole when it's there, he pressed the hole. That set the blocks where the lineman could put color on color with the linebackers, and then bang, he hit the hole when there was no one there. Those are things that are rare for a young running back to pick up on, and he looks to me like he's ready to take on that running back 3 spot.
What a deep running back depth chart they're going to have. I mean, he might barely play this year, and he might be as good as you're saying you saw, but with Edwards and Corum and other people that they've brought in the last 2 signing day classes, it's pretty deep. And by the way, they've got an offensive line who keeps winning awards for being the best offensive line every year.
And when I look at the spring game, one of the most valuable things for me as an analyst is I get the chance to do a deep dive in the rosters. You're not going to get to see everybody play, but I started looking at this Michigan offensive line, and that's a key piece because we know Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football. We know he wants to ground and pound. Sharon Moore is the offensive line coach. He's also the offensive coordinator. I looked at their starters, and I said, all right, you lose Olu Oluwatimi. But then you go out and you get Drake Nugent, who was a captain and actually graded higher by PFF at the center position last year. He comes over from Stanford. They have Zach Zinner back, Trevor Keegan back. Both guys at the right tackle position are back. You went and got one of the top transfers, Ladarius Henderson, to slot at the left tackle. But that's just the starters. If you look at that second unit, Mike, that second unit would start and be an upgrade over probably half the schools in the entire country from an offensive line standpoint. So they have great elite talent at the starting positions, but it's the depth and competition that I think is going to allow them to separate from the pack. And you mentioned the Joe Moore Award. I don't see why they can't go ahead and make a run at 3 straight.
Let me go back to 12 months ago. We're going into the Michigan spring game, and people are going, Harbaugh interviewed with the Vikings this past year. He just beat Ohio State. He made the playoff. I don't know. Maybe his heart's not in it. Well, he comes back, beats Ohio State again, goes to the playoff, says, I'm not interested in the NFL, and the Broncos come calling, and he listens again. There didn't seem to be any negative residual effect. When you were on campus this past weekend, did you feel like there was anything from the players of we just don't know that he's 100% there anymore, or was it totally in the past?
I didn't hear. Honestly, I even forgot about it at this point until you had mentioned it. And that was a similar thing last year. It's a big storyline. We live in the news cycle. It's obviously big when everything you just mentioned, Harbaugh's now interviewing for the NFL. But then once he commits back to Michigan, you turn the page because they understand what they have in Ann Arbor is a special football team that can go out and reach their goals. No one's worried about the past. And one thing, this is a phrase that Harbaugh used to say, winning cures all. So once they start winning games in the fall, once again, we'll further forget about his interviews with Denver.
Yeah, they certainly won a lot the last couple of years. Ended this past season number 3 in the final AP poll. Well, according to Fox Sports' Rob Rang, here's a look at Big Ten players and where they rank in the upcoming NFL draft. He's got 5 of the top 12 prospects overall being from the Big Ten Conference, headlined by Buckeye quarterback C.J. Stroud. We bring back Jake Butt. And let me talk about Stroud with you for a little bit. There's a chance he goes number 1 overall. It's basically him or Bryce Young. It certainly seems to be right now. How's he going to do on Sundays?
I think he'll do phenomenal because, you know, what you look at what he did in college and what he put on tape. I like to draft people off tape and rank drafts rankings off of tape. And especially in the NFL, location matters, meaning ball placement. And his accuracy, I've seen him make throws with my own 2 eyes, Ohio State, Michigan, where it doesn't matter. It's like the defense isn't even there. He just drops it in the basket. Almost you could run down the field with a blindfold on, and he's going to put the ball right where it needs to be, and he's done it in big moments. Whether he goes 1 or 2, you know, as I look at my rankings, you're splitting hairs. I would have Stroud as my number 1 just because if there's one difference, he's a little bit bigger of a body than Bryce Young, so he might be able to take the physicality of the NFL. But fit matters, situation matters. Wherever he goes, I hope that they have a plan in place for him and they have the right quarterback coach and system that can teach him the verbiage and allow him to flourish, because the dude has all the talent in the world. There's not a throw on the field he can't make.
The thing that's wild about the NFL draft is it's so often just a crapshoot. Like you can get someone who's amazing in college and then they just happen to not transfer, either something with their personal life or the system they're in or the person ahead them on the depth chart or whatever it is. So we could ask you to break down all the top guys, but what about just your favorite guys in the Big Ten? Guys that you're just like, I really think they're going to have a good career in the NFL.
Yeah, and when you ask that question, it makes me say, all right, who's going to be a guy that's going to play for 10 years and a fan base is just going to fall in love with this guy as a staple of the team? And you wouldn't have me on the show if I didn't start off with the tight end, Mike. So how about a guy I covered last year in Sam Laporta, tight end out of Iowa? And this was an easy choice for me because Iowa has become tight end U. I played with Noah Fant in the NFL. We see George Kittle. TJ Hawkinson, another guy that's one of the best to do it. Sam Laporta looks to be next in line. And when you look at a complete tight end, you say the blocking aspect has been discredited. There's not as much value. Well, one thing we know they teach in Iowa is how to run block and pass block. So he's got that part down. But he's got a nuance to his route running ability, too. There's a certain feel. He's got all the speed and agility to run all the basic routes. But what makes him elite to me is the feel. He knows where the zone defenders are. He knows how to separate with some nuance and some art. He's going to be a guy that's going to catch 40 to 50 balls every single season for the next 8 to 10 years, and he'll be a quarterback's best friend.
Anyone on defense stand out to you?
Of course. And when I went to Sam Laporta, I said, all right, well, Sidney Brown was a guy I watched when it was Illinois, Iowa. I watched these two guys match up, and Sidney Brown is a complete every down safety. And I think what benefited him so much was playing under Brett Bielema and Ryan Walters. They moved him all over the field. He can do it as a middle field high safety. They played him down in the box almost effectively as an extra linebacker. He guarded tight ends in the slot. So versatility matters in the NFL because of the roster size. The more you can do, the more valuable you become. He can do everything that you ask of him as a safety. He can play in the slot. He can also play all 4 special teams. So I think Sidney Brown is another one of those guys that is going to play for a decade plus and make some fans really happy. One more that I just want to mention real quick is Nick Herbig, the edge rusher from Wisconsin. We were talking about this. I don't like it when the first word associated with the draft prospect is negative. They call him a tweener. Maybe his arms are a little bit short or he's a little bit undersized. I like to turn on the tape. And one thing Nick Herbig knows how to do is get after the quarterback. There's an art to pass rushing, and he's kind of mastered that art. So even if he does move off the ball into a middle linebacker position in the NFL, I expect in 3rd down and 2-minute passing situations, he will move back to the line of scrimmage, and he'll be able to get after some of these NFL linemen.
There's a lot of really interesting storylines when it comes to Big Ten guys that could be drafted. I mean, you know, we didn't even get a chance to mention a guy assumed to be in the top 10, Peter Skoronski, who might go from Evanston to Chicago and stay in the area and help out the Bears at number 9. I still think no one might be more fascinating to me than Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, his ceiling is utterly, he has an electric potential, but people are so worried about his injuries, understandably so.
But look at what Ohio State's done with their receivers. It's a receiver factory. Right. He's next in line. The dude has all the potential in the world. I'm excited to see him play as well.
Thanks for joining us, man. Always good to see you. Maybe next time, don't be so handsome to make the rest of us look worse. For Jake Butt, I'm Mike Hall. Thanks for watching this edition of our show.